What's up, ladies? Okay, today I am going to go over fueling workouts and nutrition timing. So, because this is a presentation or a 16-week course relative to how do you fuel yourselves and nourish your bodies as women in the sport of CrossFit, the fueling workouts is an extremely important part of the conversation. So today I am going to add on to what we discussed in the last 6 weeks about how integral carbohydrates are for our daily lives, for our hormones, and for our training. I'm going to show you how to coordinate those carbohydrates specifically around your training, as well as the other macronutrients, protein and fats. And then we'll talk about some different situations, like what you do if you're training in the morning and you can't eat, and how you're supposed to coordinate the rest of your nutrients throughout your day to make sure that you're recovering well and strong and managing your appetite as you go. Okay, so the first thing that we want to talk about is the importance of carbohydrates. So I had gone over, we had a whole week of why carbs are important for us, how we want to make sure we get enough of them, what you want them to look like throughout the day as far as your high high glycogen, nope, I can do this, high GI index carbs. So those are the fast absorbing carbs like candy, sugar, some of the easily digested fruits. And then we have our low glycemic index carbs, which are our whole foods like our potatoes, sweet potatoes, squash, things like that, right? So carbohydrates specifically for CrossFit or functional fitness are extremely important because this is the fuel source that our body primarily uses when we perform Olympic weightlifting, the shorter metcons, box jumps, even the gymnastics movement. So we have 3 energy pathways, and carbohydrates are used in the aerobic pathway primarily. And in CrossFit, we are primarily using that aerobic pathway. Now, if you were to go on to do like a 30 to 40 minute metcon or running or something like that, then carbohydrates are extremely energy demanding for our bodies. It requires a lot of work for our bodies to take those carbohydrates, break them down, get them into the cell, and use them. Fat is an easier source for our bodies to use, but it's slower burning. So, it's less efficient. Nope, I can do this. Fat is takes longer for our body to access, but it provides us with a longer source of energy. So we use fat for things like going for long walks or steady state runs, things like that. So again, carbohydrates are our fuel source for CrossFit. And we want to make sure that we are giving our bodies adequate carbohydrates before training to allow us to push during training. So you may notice if you're someone coming into this sport or coming into this group and you didn't eat before you trained, or you would eat something like, a couple eggs and maybe half a grapefruit before you trained, and then we all of a sudden switch up and have you go to eating a bunch of carbohydrates, that you get into the gym and you have a lot more energy. This is because your body has what it needs to push during that fitness. And here's the thing about pushing during training. So you actually are not losing weight when you're performing CrossFit in the actual training session of CrossFit. You are losing weight post-training. So if you go in under-fueled and you can only create 50% output, right, your post-exercise metabolic effect is going to be lower than if you can go in and push extremely hard and maybe lift more weight, go faster in the metcon. The effects of that training session are going to be greater, and your metabolism is going to be up higher for longer post-training. So it's extremely important to fuel appropriately so you can be the Ferrari on race day instead of the garbage truck on a Monday morning, right? There's a big difference there. The other thing about carbohydrates is you want to make sure that you're giving your body enough so that it can facilitate recovery. Your body uses glucose as it's repairing your muscle to build it bigger and stronger. It needs energy to create those repairs. So you make sure that you have carbohydrates before training to push. You have them during training if it's going to be longer than an hour, so you can continue to push. And then you have them after training so that your body has what it needs to repair that muscle as fast as possible. So the general rule of thumb for carbohydrates is you want to have 40 to 60 grams of carbs before every training session, for every hour of training that you perform. What that means is you are going to look at, if you're going in for an hour of training, you're going to figure out, okay, this hour of training today, it's going to be a 10-minute strength session and it's going to be a 15-minute metcon, and the metcon isn't going to be exceptionally hard today. So I'm going to err maybe on the side of 40 grams of carbs. But if you're going in and you look at the workout and it's a 40-minute EMOM and the EMOM is going to be spicy, then you're going to err on the side of 60 grams of carbohydrates. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to break down what you should be consuming carbohydrate wise to make sure that you're properly fueled and your body can access those carbohydrates. And then if you're someone who is doing additional training, like say you're following accessory programming or you have gymnastics stuff or your coach gave you something, you're going to look also at how much time you're going to be in the gym after that. And from there, you can play around with it. You can either, if you're only going to be in the gym for another 30 minutes, maybe you just err on the side of 60 grams first and you bring a small snack with you, say a package of gummy bears or something like that, or even a banana. Bananas are my favorite go-to for everything. If you know you're going to be in the gym for 3 hours or 4 hours of training, you want to make sure that you have some intra-training carbohydrates. So if you know you're going to be in the gym for 4 hours, I want you to be bringing in, 1 or 2 bananas, maybe a bar, and then having some liquid carbohydrates like Fuel 5, dextrose, something like that, to make sure that you can maintain steady blood sugar levels and your body has, again, what it needs when you need it. Now, as far as consuming those carbohydrates, I want you to be consuming them 60 to 90 minutes before your training session. And we're going to get into in a little bit what it looks like if you are getting up in the morning and you can't eat. But otherwise, if you're training at 9 a.m., I want you to be eating your breakfast around 7:30, and then you're having those carbohydrates then. That gives your body the chance to get them out of your stomach. Generally takes about 1 to 2 hours to digest your food and get those carbohydrates in your bloodstream so that when you go to start your warm-up, those carbs are ready to fuel your fitness. For protein, I want you to have 20 to 30 grams before training and 40 to 60 grams after training. So you're having some protein before your training because studies show that if you have amino acids, which is what protein breaks down into, in your bloodstream before training, it helps your body start to repair faster. So the whole concept of muscle growth is we overload the muscle and then the muscle builds stronger as a response to that overload. That's why you get sore, or one of the reasons you get sore. So you want to make sure that you have amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, in your body so that your body can immediately start to recover and repair that muscle so that you can come back the next day and maybe you're a little bit sore. But if you didn't have that protein, you'd be a lot sore. And I can speak a lot more sore. And on top of that, you might not be getting as much muscle growth as you potentially could if you gave your body what it needs. And you're having 40 to 60 grams after training to, again, make sure that your body has everything it needs. And as a woman, we need that protein to help build hormones. So it's super, super important that we get an adequate amount. And then fats. So if you're a CrossFitter and you've been in this world for quite a long time, the whole paleo movement used to encourage us to eat whole food carbohydrates, which ended up being a relatively low carb diet, and then high fat and high protein. Unfortunately, when it comes to consuming fat, it takes a while to digest, and fat consumed with other things can slow down the digestion process significantly. So, I recommend that my athletes have 10 to 20 grams at most before training to make sure that that food isn't sitting in your stomach. And because we're prioritizing carbohydrates, you want to make sure your body can get those carbs into the bloodstream as fast as possible. And then after training, you're going to have 10 to 20 grams plus. If you're someone who really likes to have bacon and avocado and fun things like that as your post-training breakfast, post-training lunch, etc., then you can go up. Again, being mindful of the fact that fats slow digestion, right? And our post-training meal, we're trying to prioritize getting carbohydrates and protein into our body. So we don't want to eat an exceptional amount of fat because we want our body to get what it needs the fastest so we can recover the fastest. All right. So what does a pre-training meal look like? So I created this as a breakfast, but you would just switch these up if you trained at lunch or if you trained, after work, and this might be your snack. So I want you again to be getting 20 to 30 grams of protein, 40 to 60 grams of carbs, and I want you to be getting 10 to 20 grams at most of fat. So a pre-training meal, say you were going to train in the morning, looks like 3 egg whites and an egg. You could switch that up and have it be 4 ounces of chicken. And that 4 ounces of chicken breast is going to help you keep your fat low, but it's also going to give you adequate amounts of protein and it'll digest relatively quickly. Again, you're consuming this meal 60 to 90 minutes at most before your training. And then we're having 1 1/3 cups of, oh my gosh, cereal. Absolutely. Cereal is not bad because carbs aren't bad. And Rice Krispie, if you have brown Rice Krispies or white Rice Krispies, those are going to digest very quickly. They're going to digest easily. They don't cause a lot of inflammation, a lot of gut issues. And then we're having a cup of 2% milk. Milk is also not, in my opinion, bad. People say, well, we're the only animals that drink other animals' milk. Right. We're also the only animals that write books and go to outer space and drive cars. So we are a different species altogether in a whole lot of forums, including the fact that we have figured out how to thrive consuming another animal's milk. And I think there are a lot of nutrients in dairy products. So if you digest it, I am all for you consuming it. So this pre-training meal, you're looking at 47 grams of carbs, 29 grams of protein, and 11 grams of fat. This is something you can eat relatively quickly. You can also make this if you are someone who is training in the afternoon, say you're going to the 4:30 or the 5:30 class. This could be your snack meal. Or you could have alternative snack meals. You could have a scoop of protein with a Go Macro bar and a banana. You could find the kind of snack bar that you really like with a banana. My go-to is always bananas. You could have a bowl of cereal with milk and a scoop of protein. You can play around with it. There is nothing perfect. It's finding the system that works for you. And lastly, your post-training meals. So this is, again, based off of your needs. It's going to be based off of your size as a human being. If you are a larger woman, if you're tall, if you're big boned, if you carry extra muscle mass, you may default to consuming more protein after your training session, or if you had an exceptionally hard training session. For instance, I'm a competitive athlete. My training sessions, if I break them up, they're 2 hours long. If I do it all as one, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 hours long. So I'm going to make sure that my post-training meal is pretty big and pretty hefty with the protein so that I can recover from all the fitness I've just done. And that's where you're going to play around with. Sometimes, too, your appetite isn't super great after you train. I generally want my clients, my athletes, getting their food in like 30 to 45 minutes, an hour max after they train, because that's when your insulin levels are the highest, which is a reaction to the fitness. And that's when your body is it has the optimal window to get all of those nutrients into the cells, into the muscles to recover well. It's also when your metabolism is the highest. So it's going to, if you eat in excess, your body isn't going to store that as fat. And if your metabolism is super high and your body isn't getting what it needs to recover, it's going to borrow from its own stores to start to facilitate that recovery process, which that means that sometimes it will take amino acids from already existing muscle to repair broken muscle, which is redundant. You don't want that to happen, right? You're trying to build muscle, so you don't want to break down muscle to repair muscle. It's also how you get injured. So it's very, very important that you try to be mindful of consuming a meal no more than 60 minutes after your training session. And again, you're trying to be mindful of that fat, because you don't want to overeat a lot of fat, because you want your body to be able to get those nutrients into the system as fast as possible. And I have here very simple chicken breast, sweet potato, veggies. I don't really count your veggies in your macros, because tomatoes, I mean, it takes a lot of tomatoes to get a significant amount of carbohydrates. And I would rather you look at most vegetables as nutrients instead of worrying about their macro content, because it's important that you always eat your vegetables. Okay. Now, what happens if you are training early in the morning? So you have this thing called glycogen, which I talked about in our carbohydrate week. Glycogen is the storage form of carbohydrates. So we have 600 to 800 calories, or I believe it's, what is it? 200 to 400. No, that can't be right. I can't remember what the grams of carbohydrates are, but it's 600 to 800 calories worth of carbohydrates that our body can store in our muscles, in our liver, and it's stored as glycogen. So we always have that if we stock up properly, right? So if you go into a training session and you're training fasted, okay, if you've done a good job, you've stocked up your glycogen stores, your body has access to those carbohydrates to facilitate that training. If you're someone who is keto or low carb, then you might have low glycogen stores. Your body is still going to make glucose, but it has to make it from other sources. So it's going to make it from fat or protein. And as I've explained before, that is a very inefficient system. If you want to go do Fran and you need to be like this, you don't really have a whole lot of time for your body to go, wait, I need some glucose. Let me make some from protein real quick, right? It's a process that takes a moment, and it's energy demanding. Whereas if you have those carbohydrates already on hand, either in the form of glycogen or you've eaten something before training, now your body is ready to go. Again, I use the car analogy because everybody gets it. If we have a Ferrari with the jet fuel on board, ready to race around the track, that's going to help you win the race, versus if you're a diesel engine in this big old truck and your body has to be like, hang on, let me convert this diesel into the jet fuel to get around the track. That's not going to make you very fast, right? And again, the more you can create output in your training session, the more efficient it's going to be for your metabolism, recovery, and muscle building after your training session. So all that to say, if you're someone who trains early in the morning and you can't eat before you train, then you need to be mindful of what you're eating the night before you go to bed. So I want you to have a carbohydrate-rich dinner, 40 to 60 grams, and then I want you to have 20 to 30 grams of carbs before you go to bed. So your carb-rich dinner might be a cup of rice and some chicken and some vegetables, and then before you go to bed, you might just have a banana, which bananas also help you make tryptophan, which is the precursor to melatonin, which helps you sleep as well. So super cool, win-win. You get deeper sleep and you're stocking up your glycogen stores. So when you wake up in the morning, you have those carbs on board to crush your fitness. And then if you can, I highly encourage you to sip on some Gatorade, orange juice, or even put some honey in your coffee. All those little carbs are going to help. They're going to make a difference. And then you'll play around with it and you'll see what works for you. And because we've gotten you over your fear of carbohydrates, you see that carbs are really our best friends, especially as women. Okay, so after all that, you're going to take the rest of your macros, your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats, and you're just going to spread them out over the rest of the day. So my general rule with my athletes, clients, are if you're sedentary, I don't want you eating a ton of carbohydrates during your sedentary time, because sedentary doesn't use a lot of carbs. Carbs are for activity, and protein and fat are for sedentary, right? And your brain likes some carbs, but we talked about glycogen, right? So if you train in the morning and you had the opportunity to carb up for your training session, and then you come home and you eat the carbs for your training session, that 40 to 60 grams of carbs that you had post-training is also going to lead nicely into a sedentary day of working and using those carbs for thinking. Because it doesn't, weirdly enough, our brain uses 20% of the energy we consume. And it needs that minimum of 50 grams of carbohydrates, but it can make it again from other sources. So if you are eating protein and fat, right, you're not doing Fran. So if you have emails you need to respond to, you don't have to respond like at a moment's notice in the same way that you have to go do really fast thrusters. So your body can take that protein and the fat that you're consuming and convert it to glucose to help facilitate those thoughts. And I want you to focus on that because that'll also give you steady blood sugar. And our body, when we overeat carbohydrates, our body does store it after it puts the stocks up in the glycogen. It will store it as fat. So if you're eating, gummy bears at lunchtime, you're not only going to get a sugar crash, your body's not going to need those. And so because you're not doing anything, you're sitting, right? So it's going to store it as body fat. So being mindful of that, play around with how much protein and, how many carbohydrates you need for work so that you feel good, but that you have steady state energy. And I don't want you skipping carbs at dinner. You always eat carbs at dinner. That's very important because you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up to recover from the day, to stock your glycogen stores up, and to help sleep really well. And I also want you eating every 3 to 4 hours because that's going to manage you getting exceptionally hungry, which then leads you to the chip bag or the cookie drawer. And then it also helps you keep that steady blood sugar so you can be clear-headed. And again, we've been working on making sure that you guys are getting enough veggies. You should be eating 4 to 6 servings of veggies a day, and mostly whole food carbs outside of your training. We eat the higher glycemic, maybe more processed carbs before and after training because we want easily digested and fast available. We have whole food carbs outside of training because our body can process them slower. All right. That was a very long way of saying eat your carbs. And then we will cover any questions you have throughout this week. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the Facebook group.